Hello, everybody. Welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews. My name is Alyssa, and this is my review for The Wheel of Time, Season 1, Episode 5, Blood Calls Blood. First off, a spoiler warning. If you have not seen all the way up through the end of this episode, hit pause on this, go back, watch the episode, and then come back and watch my review, please. And also, I should start saying this up front more often. Subscribe if you have not already to my channel. So this is a live stream review. I'm recording this live because I just don't have time this weekend to do the pre-recorded, edited versions of my reviews. So I did the same thing with Star Trek Discovery earlier this evening, so you can check that review out if you are into Star Trek Discovery. So this will be less edited. There will be no little visual aids, as I like to call them, but I will still go through all of my thoughts on the episode. And of course, you don't have to watch it live. You can watch it anytime because it's right there on my channel. So overall thoughts on this episode. I did like this a little better than last week's. It didn't have like the dramatic ending that last week had. I really loved the ending scene in last week's episode. Very fantastic. But overall, I found this week's episode to be more consistent, a little more character development. Both episodes did do a very good job on establishing some mythology, establishing the world building. I felt both episodes did an excellent job at that. But I thought this week's episode was stronger throughout the three storylines. So I did overall really enjoy this one. Now, real quick before I jump into the details, I do this on every review that I give in case you haven't seen my previous reviews. I like to talk about where I'm at with the book. So I have read the first two books 20 years ago, and I don't remember a lot of details. I'm currently rereading the first book, The Eye of the World, and I am at this point far behind where the show is at. The show is moving at a breakneck pace, like really fast. From what I understand, they don't actually go to the White Tower in the first book, so they are incorporating elements of future books into this season, which I did hear they were going to do. But where I am at in the books is about the start of episode 3, I think, but it's not a really one-to-one comparison because they skip a lot. So I just read a lot of stuff recently that is not even on the show. But anyway, the point of all this is that I'm mostly coming at this as a person who hasn't read the books. I have a very vague familiarity with the books, so I mostly consider myself someone who is mostly a viewer of the show. So I'm coming at it from that angle. So let's go through the three storylines. I will start with, I guess what I would say is my least favorite. Last week I had a very clear least favorite storyline. This week I think they were all pretty solid. I didn't really think any of them were bad at all. But I'll start with the Matt and Rand storyline. And R.I.P. Tom Maryland. I guess he died at the end of last week's episode. I missed that somehow. I listened to a podcast that they were talking about how he died. I was like, oh, he did? I don't know. How did I miss that? I don't know. But they did mention it. I mean, there's always the chance that he's secretly still alive and he pops up again. But they certainly believe him to be dead. And that makes me think, why did they bring this character into the show? For 2 episodes. It seems like, because he was introduced earlier in the books, so they should have at least done that, introduced him like back in Two Rivers where he comes in the books, and at least have him in like 4 episodes. It seems rather pointless to kill him off after 2, but in any case, we're now following Rand and Matt. Matt is not looking good. So everything is a month later. So that's the other interesting thing. This was a time jump in this episode. We've yada-yada'd over a month. They were all going on some boring journey where nothing really happened. Pretty uneventful, apparently, because they're all still talking about the things that happened a month earlier in each storyline. But a month has passed, and Matt is not looking good at all. Now, I talked last week about how the show really seems to want us to guess who the Dragon Reborn is, and they seem to be dangling Matt out there as a possibility, also Nynaeve. It was almost flat out, it was really strongly implied that Nynaeve was the Dragon Reborn after last week's episode, but not so much this week, but I'll talk about her when I get into that storyline a little bit. But they would definitely seem to be implying that with Matt, or at the very least that he was a male channeler. And they seem to be leaning more heavily onto that aspect of it this week, that he is the male channeler, and we really get a strong hint at that when the false dragon, the Jesus dude, as I call him, looks directly in Matt's eyes and starts laughing, like he can sense that Matt is also a channeler. So that was very interesting. So it'd be very interesting to see where they're going with Matt's storyline, because he just does not seem to be doing that well. And I think it's a matter of time before he does end up channeling. I think that's almost inevitable. So I found it interesting that Rand is like, well, I want to go to the White Tower to see if I can find Egwene, but I don't know if it's a good idea to bring Matt there, based on what I've seen, what they do to false dragons, what they do to male channelers. Also, Tom told him that story in last week's episode about his nephew. I can see why Rand would be very hesitant to go to the White Tower. So he's like, yeah, let's just hang out in town a little bit. There's no rush to go to the White Tower. And then we get the introduction of a new character, an ogre or an ogier, and God, I'm blanking on his name. And I vaguely remember this character from the books, but not really from my reading of it 20 years ago. I haven't gotten to him yet in my reread. But as far as the show goes, I really love this character. Very interesting character. Kind of reminded me a little bit of some kind of alien species on Star Trek, how he was always like, oh, you humans, you're always in such a hurry. But he brings a very interesting perspective to the world. I really loved his perspective. So I hope we get a lot of this character, because I really, really enjoyed the scenes that we did get with him in this episode. We also have, for the first time, characters starting to come back together. Nynaeve meets up with Rand and Matt. And I thought it was very funny that the Ogier thought it was Egwene. He's like, hey, look, I found the girl with the braid you were talking about. Here she is. And the way that he presented it was just very entertaining. I really loved that. But and Rand never told her, well, that's not quite the girl I was looking for, but that's cool. This is cool too. This is a nice surprise too, because they thought that Nynaeve was dead. So that's pretty awesome for them. And we're starting to see the characters start to come back together a little bit. Although it was a really odd cut, because it went from the scene with Nynaeve and the lady from the Red Aja, whose name I always forget. Is she Elaine, or is that one of the other ones? Anyways, there was a scene when they were talking, and then if I recall correctly, it just cut straight to the scene where then the Ogier brings Nynaeve to Rand, and that was just a very odd cut. But minor complaint. In any case, it was cool to have that reunion, and we're going to start to see, I think, next week, I think we'll see more of the characters starting to come back together again, and that's good. I think they weren't together long enough. They were together for 2 episodes and all split off. So, and Nynaeve was only really with them in the first episode. So I'm hoping by episode 6 we get most, if not all of them, back together again, and then episode 7 and 8 we can have the whole band back together once again. And Nynaeve, of course, she has no interest in the Aes Sedai. She just wants to get her friends back. She's like, hey, let's just find Egwene and Perrin and let's get out of here. Is the basic gist of it. But of course, it's not going to happen that way. As I will talk about a little bit when we get to the Aes Sedai storyline, that they have other ideas about Nynaeve. But anyways, this wasn't like, there was no big super exciting thing that happened, but I found this storyline very interesting. And I love a lot of the scenes between Matt and Iran, and I love that new character, the Ogier. I'll have his name down by next week. But so I enjoyed the storyline, even though it wasn't like any big thing happening. So let me jump over to the next storyline I want to talk about, which would be the Egwene and Perrin storyline. Now, finally, something happened in the storyline. I just feel like so the last 2 episodes they had them with the Tinkers. I keep calling them gypsies, but they're the Tinkers is what they're called. I heard another podcast were referring to them as deadheads or fish, like they're following fish around, which I do, and believe me, they're not fish fans. They're Tinkers. Although they are looking for the song. So maybe they kind of are fish fans. I don't know. But anyways, I digress. The Tinkers is what they're called. And the previous 2 episodes, I thought that storyline went on for 1 episode too long. I think this show can learn from shows like Game of Thrones or The Expanse or multiple other shows that I have watched where it's okay to give a character a night off or an episode off or a couple characters. It's okay to give a storyline an episode off. It's all right. You can do that. So I felt like I don't know how much we really needed them last week, to be perfectly honest. I think it was just mostly filler. You could say maybe, gave us more insight on the Tinkers. That's true. Because we got it was a pretty lovely scene actually with last week with that lady talking about her daughter and all that stuff. But I don't know that to move the story forward. This week, things are happening. The White Cloaks return, and man, is that dude fucking evil, and I love him so much as a character. He's such a great villain, so friggin' evil. I really liked that the Tinkers stuck up for Perrin and Egwene and all locked arms and peaceful protest. So I thought that was good, but then of course Egwene and Perrin end up getting caught. Anyways, so I was a little bit unclear on why he thought Egwene was a channeler. Like, he clearly remembered them from before. Did he pick up on the fact that Moraine was an Aes Sedai? I was unclear. Why? I didn't really quite get that. Like, why he suspected them. So I am not sure. But regardless, he does bring them in. A lot of very intense scenes. Anytime this guy touches the screen, the tension just goes sky high. I just love his presence on the screen. I love this actor. I mentioned his name in the last review that I did with him in it, which was for episode 2, but I'm blanking on it now. But very good actor. He's just chilling. So we get a very intense sequence where he is asking them to choose. Either Egwene can channel and he'll have to kill her, but Perrin can go free, or Egwene won't channel and he's going to kill Perrin. And she can't do anything to stop it because she's not channeling. And she ultimately does start to channel just a little bit, but she just creates a little spark and it bounces off of him. But we do see for the first time that Egwene can channel. She doesn't have the power that Nynaeve has, or at least she's not able to express that power at this point. But she is able to channel the one power, and we get to see that for the first time. So that was kind of neat because we're definitely going to get more into that as the show goes on. And then the wolves come. And I'm very intrigued about Perrin's connection with the wolves. This is another thing that I just vaguely remember from my reading of the books 20 years ago, that there's some deal with Perrin and the wolves, but I can't really remember it. But I'm really interested. I think it's very intriguing. He does not seem to be a male channeler per se. He's not channeling the one power, I don't think. But there's definitely a connection between him and the wolves. And I find this very interesting. And Perrin is starting to realize this for the first time, because he was afraid of the wolves before. And this time he was like, you know what, they're not going to harm us. And Egwene's like, how do you know that? And she's like, it's not going to harm us. And of course, they don't, because they're there to protect Perrin. So I really enjoyed this storyline. This is where we get the most action, probably, but I don't feel like this show really needs to have action every week. I feel like there's been some kind of big action scene at the end of every episode, and this week the wolves was the most action that we get, and I think that's okay. Like, I think that is totally fine. I liked the character development, and I loved the really intense scenes with the white cloaks. So they move on into the next episode, where I assume that they will meet up with some of our other characters. So let me get into the final storyline, which is a little bit more going on there, because we've got Moraine and Lan. We've got Stefan. That's his name. I couldn't think of his name last week. Stefan. We've got Nynaeve. A lot of politics going on with the different Ajas moving in on Nynaeve, trying to claim her. Nynaeve, of course, has no intention of joining the Aes Sedai, but as the Red Aja lady, again, whose name I cannot remember, she said that she will be a novice, whether she thinks she's going to be or not. It's happening. So I'm going to try to get her into the Red Aja. So this is interesting to me, because I got the impression that after last week's, that they were really setting her up to be the Dragon Reborn, because of how they talked about the sun, and like it was a burst of the sun, and a sphere says the sun, and the Dragon Reborn, or the fake dragon, I should say, the false dragon, recycled that line from Moraine, and I thought they were implying that Nynaeve was possibly the Dragon Reborn, but the Aes Sedai don't seem to be going in that direction. They seem to be wanting to bring this powerful channeler into their ranks, into the Aes Sedai, not necessarily that she's the Dragon Reborn. At least that's how I read it. I could be wrong. Maybe they also still think that she could be the Dragon Reborn, and they want her as an Aes Sedai, but that's not how I read that, which is a little different than I interpreted at the end of last week's episode. So we'll just have to see where things are going. Once again, I should mention that I do know who the Dragon Reborn is in the books, but the showrunner has said that they may or may not be the same person. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. So that's interesting. I'm really interested in seeing who will be the Dragon Reborn. So we get a lot of stuff with Stefan, and it was kind of inevitable that he was going to kill himself, let's be real. But along the way, get a lot of very interesting details about more than we got some last week too, but about warders, the life of a warder, and how he met his Aes Sedai. A lot of stuff about the different factions of the Aes Sedai and all that stuff, the different Ajas. So we get a lot of world building here. But his storyline in particular wasn't the best for me, because I knew where it was heading. There was no way he was walking out of this episode. I was actually surprised that he made it that long, but it does make sense that they would save his dramatic suicide for the end. And I also have to mention too that with the funeral at the end, they're all wearing white. Oh, and they're wearing what he wears white too when he, puts the ring in the flame as well. So white seems to be the color for funerals. He also mentioned the last time I wore white was my father's funeral. So as opposed to us who wear black for funerals, they wear white, which is interesting because we have the white cloaks, but I am assuming it has something to do with the light and spirits going to the light or something along those lines. That isn't explained in the show. Or at least not that I caught. But at that funeral at the end, where we have Lan screaming, get really upset, wearing all white, that scene was in the trailer, and that was the scene that told me that Lan doesn't die. Last week, when blood is gushing out of his throat, and it's not just because he's still in the books, it was because the show can change the books, so he could die there. In the show, for all we know. But I was like, well, he can't die because we haven't seen that scene from the trailer where he's wearing all white and really upset. So I knew so that scene was in this week's episode, but that's how I knew he wasn't dying last week. and we see Moraine having tears when he's really upset. And again, we can see the connection, the emotional connection between the water and the Aes Sedai. So that was all very interesting. Now, as far as Nynaeve, as I said, I think that she still could be the Dragon Reborn, but I'm not sure if that's where they're heading anymore. But I do think she's not going to be running away with her fellow Edmund Fielders. Do they call it Edmund's Field in the show? It's what it's called in the books. Two Rivers is the valley that they're from, but their town, I think, was Edmund's Field. But anyway, her fellow Riverers, they're not all running off with her as she thinks they are. But again, there was not a lot of action in this storyline, but I think we did get a lot of world building, a lot of insight to the politics of the White Tower. So overall, I really enjoyed this storyline as well. Oh, and I also have to mention, before I wrap this up, the sets are just phenomenal in this show. And the wide shot of the city of Tar Valon, that's the city that the White Tower is in, and the White Tower with the mountain behind it, I used it for my screenshot for this video. Magnificent, absolutely beautiful. Loved it. So there's really a lot to love about this show. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of complaining from book readers going out there, but you know, there was for Game of Thrones too. So I am enjoying the show. I don't think it's been perfect, but I'm really, really enjoying it. Okay, excuse me. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up with my rating out of 10. So 1 would be the lowest score, 10 would be the highest. And I think I'm going to say an 8.5. I started this review thinking I was going to give it an 8. And then as I went through it and talked about it, I talked myself into raising it up half a point to an 8.5, which I think is the second highest rated episode that I've given. Brandon, welcome to the chat. I fear I'm one of those complaining book readers. I didn't realize you read the books, Brandon. I thought you hadn't read the books. Well, I love it. So I think this is a great show. So I don't care what you complaining book readers say. Book readers are always going to complain about shows that are adapted off it. It's never going to be perfect. Everyone always has their own imagination, their own picture of what things are supposed to be. And if they don't match your imagination perfectly, and it never, ever, ever, ever will, then you're going to complain. And that's just kind of the natural course of things. That's how I see it. It was the same thing in Game of Thrones. And I've done that too. I've read, there's been things that I've watched that are based off of the books. That I will complain about as well. And it's definitely made some changes. I do have some basic knowledge of the books, and it's definitely made some significant changes, but it's supposed to. It's a different medium. So it's whether or not you like the changes that it made is what it really boils down to. Anyways, I got distracted by Brandon here in the chat. As I said, I am giving this an 8.5, very strong episode, really enjoying what I'm seeing overall. And I will be back next week for my review for season 1, episode 6. Not sure yet whether it will be another live stream. I think I have a little more availability next weekend, so I may do it as a pre-recorded video. But just subscribe so you can get your notifications. Click that bell for the notifications, and you can see it one way or the other, whether it is a live stream or a pre-recorded video. One last little tidbit. I am going to do another live stream this Saturday, December 4th at 4 o'clock p.m. West Coast time for me, 7 o'clock p.m. for the East Coast. I will create a link and it'll be posted on my channel so anyone in the world can click on it and see what time it is for you. And that live stream is just going to be sort of a hodgepodge of random topics. I'm going to give a little bit of an update about my life as a transgender woman. But I'm also going to talk about a lot of other just random shows and movies and things that I haven't covered in other videos. And then if people show up in the chat, such as Brandon here or anyone else, and they want to ask questions or just talk, then we'll do that as well. So that'll be Saturday the 4th at 4 p.m. West Coast time. So join me for that and join me for my review for The Wheel of Time Season 1, Episode 6 next week. And I will see you soon. Bye, everybody.